The wind howled across the jagged peaks of the Hindu Kush Mountains, carrying with it the promise of another brutal Afghan winter. Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez pulled his tactical scarf tighter around his face as he surveyed the valley below through his binoculars. The snow was falling harder now, thick flakes that would soon make visibility nearly impossible. Rodriguez had been leading SEAL Team 7 through these mountains for 3 days, tracking a high-value target that intelligence suggested was moving weapons through this remote corridor. The team consisted of 6 highly trained operators, each carrying specialized equipment for what was supposed to be a quick reconnaissance mission. Now, as Rodriguez watched the weather deteriorate, he began to question whether quick was still possible. "Storm's getting worse," Staff Sergeant, Petty Officer First Class Jake Morrison said quietly, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Morrison was the team's communications specialist, responsible for maintaining contact with their forward operating base 60 miles away. His radio equipment was their lifeline in these isolated mountains. Rodriguez nodded grimly. The weather forecast had called for light snow, but the mountains had their own rules. He had seen clear skies turn into whiteout conditions in minutes up here. The Hindu Kush was unforgiving to those who underestimated its power. "How's our comm situation?" Rodriguez asked, keeping his voice low despite their remote location. In these mountains, sound could carry unexpectedly far, and they had no way of knowing who might be listening. Morrison checked his equipment, adjusting the antenna on his pack-mounted radio system. Signals getting weaker. The storm's interfering with satellite communication. "I can still reach base, but it's getting scratchy." The rest of the team was positioned around their temporary observation post, a collection of large boulders that provided some shelter from the wind. Petty Officer Second Class Tommy Chun, their explosive ordnance specialist, was checking his equipment for the 3rd time that hour. Chun was meticulous about his gear, knowing that in their line of work, one faulty piece of equipment could mean the difference between mission success and disaster. Hospital Corpsman Second Class David Williams was treating a minor cut on Petty Officer Mike Foster's hand, the result of a slip on the icy rocks during their climb to this position. Williams worked efficiently, cleaning the wound and applying a waterproof bandage that would hold up in the harsh conditions. The 6th member of their team, Petty Officer First Class Alex Turner, served as their forward observer. Turner had positioned himself 30 meters ahead of the main group, watching the approach routes to their position through a high-powered scope. His job was to spot threats before they could get close enough to compromise the team. Rodriguez studied the intelligence briefing one more time, though he had memorized every detail during their preparation phase. Their target was Akmal Hassan, a Taliban commander responsible for coordinating arms shipments from Pakistan into Afghanistan. Hassan was reportedly traveling with a small convoy of vehicles, moving at night to avoid coalition aircraft. The planned intercept point was a narrow pass 3 kilometers north of their current position. Intelligence suggested Hassan's convoy would use this route within the next 24 hours. The team's mission was to observe, gather intelligence on the convoy's composition and destination, and, if possible, capture Hassan alive. Movement in the valley. Turner's voice crackled through their tactical radio system. 2 vehicles, heading north along the trail we identified. Rodriguez immediately focused his binoculars on the area Turner indicated. Through the swirling snow, he could make out the faint outline of what appeared to be a pickup truck followed by a larger vehicle, possibly a cargo truck. The vehicles were moving slowly, their headlights cutting through the darkness and snowfall. "Confirmed 2 vehicles," Rodriguez whispered into his radio. "Can you make out how many personnel?" Turner adjusted his scope, trying to get a clearer view through the deteriorating weather conditions. "Negative on personnel count. Snow's too thick, and they're moving with lights off mostly, using what looks like night vision equipment." This was exactly what their intelligence had predicted. Hassan's group was known for using night vision technology acquired from various sources, including equipment captured from coalition forces or purchased on the black market. The fact that the convoy was moving in these conditions suggested they were either very confident in their route or under significant pressure to maintain their schedule. Rodriguez made a quick decision. "Pack it up. We're moving to intercept position Alpha." The team began breaking down their observation post with practiced efficiency. Each man knew exactly what needed to be done and in what order. Within 5 minutes, they were ready to move, their equipment secured, and their weapons prepared for potential contact. The route to intercept position Alpha would take them along a ridgeline that paralleled the convoy's probable path. If they moved quickly, they could reach the intercept point before the convoy passed through the narrow valley ahead. The terrain was treacherous in these conditions, but all 6 men were experienced mountain warfare specialists. Rodriguez took point, using his GPS device to navigate through the blowing snow. The device's screen glowed dimly as he checked their progress against the digital map loaded with their mission waypoints. Behind him, the rest of the team maintained tactical spacing, each man responsible for watching a different sector as they moved. The wind was getting stronger, and Rodriguez could feel the temperature dropping even further. His tactical gloves provided some protection, but he knew that prolonged exposure to these conditions would quickly become dangerous. They needed to complete their mission and get to shelter before the storm got worse. "How far to Alpha?" Morrison asked during a brief halt. Rodriguez checked his GPS again. 1,500 meters. "We should be there in 20 minutes if the terrain cooperates." As they continued their movement, Turner maintained his position as rear security, periodically stopping to observe their back trail through his scope. The snowfall was making tracking nearly impossible, which worked in their favor, but it also meant they couldn't easily spot anyone who might be following them. Chen was having trouble with his footing on the icy rocks. The explosive ordnance specialist was carrying additional weight and specialized equipment, and the uneven terrain was challenging even for someone with his training and experience. Williams moved up to assist him, helping to steady the heavier man as they navigated a particularly difficult section of the ridge. Foster, despite his bandaged hand, was maintaining his position in the patrol formation without complaint. The cut was minor, but in these extreme conditions, even small injuries could become serious problems if not properly managed. Rodriguez made a mental note to have Williams check the wound again once they reached their destination. The convoy below was making steady progress through the valley, their vehicles leaving tracks in the snow that would be invisible from overhead surveillance, but clearly marked the route they had taken. Rodriguez wondered if Hassan understood how exposed he was making himself by traveling in these conditions, or if the pressure to complete his mission was forcing him to take unnecessary risks. "Staff Sergeant," Turner called quietly over the radio. "I'm seeing additional lights behind the convoy. Looks like they might have more vehicles following." Rodriguez stopped the patrol and moved to a position where he could observe the valley below. Through his binoculars, he could indeed see additional lights, distant but definitely moving in the same direction as the original 2 vehicles they had spotted. This changed the tactical situation significantly. Instead of a small convoy with perhaps 6 to 8 personnel, they might be looking at a larger group with additional security elements. Rodriguez quickly reviewed their mission parameters and rules of engagement. They were authorized to capture Hassan if the opportunity presented itself, but they were not expected to engage a superior force. "Count on the additional vehicles?" Rodriguez asked Turner. "At least 2 more, possibly 3. Hard to get an accurate count through this weather." Rodriguez weighed their options. They could continue to the intercept position and gather intelligence as planned, or they could adjust their position to maintain observation while staying clear of what was obviously a larger enemy force than anticipated. "We stick with the plan," Rodriguez decided. "But we maintain distance and focus on intelligence gathering. No direct action unless we have a clear advantage." The team resumed their movement toward position Alpha, but Rodriguez increased their interval and adjusted their route to approach from a more concealed angle. The larger enemy force meant they needed to be more careful about their positioning and have clear escape routes planned. As they neared their destination, the storm continued to intensify. The snow was now falling so heavily that visibility was limited to less than 50 meters in most directions. The wind was creating a constant noise that would help mask their movement, but would also make it harder to hear approaching threats. Position Alpha was located on a rocky outcrop that overlooked the narrow pass Hassan's convoy would have to use to continue north. The position offered excellent fields of observation and multiple escape routes, but it was also exposed to the full force of the mountain weather. Rodriguez positioned his team carefully, with Turner taking the primary observation position while Morrison set up his communications equipment in a sheltered area behind the rocks. Chun and Foster took security positions covering their flanks, while Williams prepared to provide medical support if needed and served as Rodriguez's runner. "Comms check," Rodriguez ordered quietly. Morrison tested his equipment and shook his head. "Signal's very weak. The storm is really interfering with satellite communication. I can barely reach base, and the signal keeps cutting out." This was another complication Rodriguez hadn't anticipated. If they lost communication entirely, the team would be operating independently until they could reach a position with better signal coverage. In these mountains, that could mean several days of movement back toward their base. "Keep trying to maintain contact," Rodriguez instructed. "Send an update on our position and the increased enemy force size. Make sure base knows we're dealing with more than the original intelligence estimate." Turner was adjusting his scope and range-finding equipment, preparing to observe the convoy when it reached the pass below. The wind was making it difficult to keep his optics steady, and the snow was beginning to accumulate on his equipment. "First vehicle entering the pass now," Turner reported. "Pickup truck with what looks like a mounted weapon in the back. Can't make out the specific type through this weather." Rodriguez moved to his own observation position and focused his binoculars on the approaching convoy. The vehicles were moving slowly through the narrow pass, their drivers obviously struggling with the deteriorating road conditions. The snow was making the already dangerous mountain road even more treacherous. "Second vehicle confirmed," Turner continued. "Larger truck, covered cargo area. Could be personnel transport or supplies." The convoy was now directly below their position, close enough that Rodriguez could make out individual figures moving around the vehicles. The convoy had stopped, apparently dealing with some kind of mechanical problem or obstacle. "They're having trouble with the road conditions," Rodriguez observed. "This might be our chance to get detailed intelligence on their composition and equipment." Through their optics, the team could see men getting out of the vehicles to examine what appeared to be a breakdown or stuck vehicle. The figures were bundled against the cold and snow, making identification difficult, but their movement patterns and equipment suggested trained fighters rather than simple transporters. "Count at least 8 personnel visible," Turner reported. "Could be more still in the vehicles." Rodriguez was studying the group below when Morrison suddenly grabbed his arm. "Staff Sergeant, I'm picking up radio chatter on enemy frequencies. Sounds like they're coordinating with additional units." This was the intelligence break they had hoped for. If Hassan's group was communicating with other units, Morrison might be able to intercept information about their broader operational plans. "Can you determine their positions or intentions?" Rodriguez asked. Morrison was adjusting his interception equipment, trying to get a clearer signal through the storm interference. "They're using encrypted communications, but I'm picking up multiple call signs. Sounds like they have units positioned ahead of this convoy, and possibly behind it as well." Rodriguez felt the tactical situation shifting around them. What had started as a simple reconnaissance mission against a small convoy was beginning to look like something much larger. If Hassan was traveling with coordinated security elements positioned throughout the valley, the SEAL team might be walking into a much more dangerous situation than they had planned. "Third and fourth vehicles now visible," Turner reported. "Both appear to be pickup trucks with mounted weapons. This is definitely a security convoy, not just transport." Rodriguez made another quick assessment of their position and options. They were in an excellent observation position, but if the enemy had security elements positioned throughout the area, they might already be under observation themselves. The storm was providing concealment, but it was also limiting their ability to detect threats. The convoy below was getting organized again, with several men working to free what appeared to be a stuck vehicle. The delay was giving Rodriguez's team valuable time to observe and gather intelligence, but it was also keeping them exposed in their current position longer than planned. "Williams," Rodriguez called quietly. "Check our escape routes. Make sure we can still move out quickly if needed." Williams moved carefully to examine the paths they had identified for withdrawal from their position. The snow was accumulating quickly, and some of the routes that had been clear when they arrived were becoming more difficult to navigate. "Primary route still clear," Williams reported. "Secondary route is getting sketchy with the snow accumulation. We should consider moving soon if we're going to maintain our mobility options." Rodriguez was weighing the value of continued observation against the increasing risk of their tactical situation when Turner suddenly tensed at his scope. Movement on the ridgeline across the valley. Turner reported urgently. Multiple figures, armed, moving in our direction. Rodriguez immediately shifted his binoculars to the area Turner had indicated. Through the swirling snow, he could make out dark shapes moving along the opposite ridgeline, their movements deliberate and coordinated. These weren't random travelers caught in the storm. These were fighters, and they were moving with purpose toward the SEAL team's position. Count and disposition? Rodriguez whispered into his radio, his voice steady despite the rapidly changing tactical situation. Turner was tracking the approaching figures through his high-powered scope, trying to get accurate numbers through the deteriorating visibility. At least 6, possibly 8 personnel. They're spread out in tactical formation, armed with rifles. Distance approximately 800 meters, and closing. Rodriguez's mind raced through their options. The team was now caught between the convoy below and an unknown number of armed fighters approaching from across the valley. Their position, which had been chosen for observation, was becoming a potential trap. The storm that had provided concealment was now working against them, limiting their visibility and mobility options. Morrison, any success with enemy communications? Rodriguez asked, hoping to gain some insight into what they were facing. Morrison was working frantically with his interception equipment, trying to piece together the fragmented radio traffic he was receiving. Picking up multiple units coordinating. Sounds like the convoy was bait, Staff Sergeant. They've been expecting someone to observe this route. The realization hit Rodriguez like a physical blow. Hassan wasn't just moving weapons through this valley. He was conducting a counterintelligence operation, using the convoy to draw coalition forces into a predetermined killing zone. The SEAL team had walked directly into a carefully planned ambush. Chun, Foster, what's our situation on the flanks? Rodriguez demanded, needing to know if they were completely surrounded or if escape routes remained open. Chun was observing the southern approach to their position through his weapon scope. Southern route still appears clear, but visibility is getting worse by the minute. Foster, despite his injured hand, was maintaining observation of their northern flank. Nothing moving on the north side yet, but these conditions make it hard to see anyone until they're close. Rodriguez was calculating distances and timing in his head. The approaching fighters were still several minutes away, but in this terrain and weather, movement would be slow and dangerous. If they waited much longer to move, they might find themselves completely cut off. Williams moved up beside Rodriguez, his medical kit secured for rapid movement. Staff Sergeant, we need to consider the weather factor. If this storm gets worse, we could be looking at survival issues regardless of the tactical situation. Rodriguez knew Williams was right. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and the wind was increasing to dangerous levels. Prolonged exposure in these conditions could incapacitate his team even if they avoided contact with enemy forces. Turner, can you identify any specific weapons or equipment with the approaching force? Rodriguez asked, trying to gather as much intelligence as possible before they had to move. Turner was using the maximum magnification on his scope, fighting the wind that kept pushing his position slightly off target. Definitely military-grade rifles. Looks like AK variants mostly. At least one individual appears to have a larger weapon, possibly a light machine gun or designated marksman rifle. The tactical picture was becoming clearer, and it wasn't favorable. The enemy had positioned forces to observe and engage anyone who tried to intercept the convoy. They had expected coalition forces to use exactly the type of observation position Rodriguez's team had selected. Movement from the convoy, Turner reported. They've got their vehicles moving again, and personnel are taking defensive positions around the pass. Rodriguez quickly assessed their new situation. The convoy was no longer just passing through. They were establishing a defensive position in the pass below, creating an anvil for the hammer that was approaching from across the valley. The SEAL team was about to be caught between two enemy forces in terrain that offered limited escape options. We're moving, Rodriguez decided. Primary escape route, maximum speed. Turner, your rear security. Everyone else, standard withdrawal formation. The team began their withdrawal from position alpha with practiced efficiency, but Rodriguez could see that the snow was making movement much more difficult than when they had arrived. The rocks were becoming slippery with ice, and the accumulating snow was hiding obstacles and uneven ground. Chen was having particular difficulty with his heavier equipment load. Despite his training and conditioning, the combination of altitude, weather, and weight was slowing him down. Williams moved to assist, taking some of Chen's gear to help distribute the load more evenly. Contact rear. Turner's voice crackled over their radios. The approaching force has increased their movement speed. They've spotted our withdrawal. Rodriguez felt his stomach tighten. Being spotted during a withdrawal was one of the most dangerous situations in infantry combat. It meant the enemy knew their position and direction of movement, giving them the ability to predict and intercept their route. How long until they're in effective range? Rodriguez asked, needing to know how much time they had before bullets started flying. Turner was still observing the pursuing force while moving backward over the treacherous terrain. At their current rate, maybe 10 minutes before they're close enough for accurate fire. But this wind and snow will affect their accuracy significantly. Rodriguez was weighing their options when Morrison suddenly stopped, pressing his hand to his radio headset. Staff Sergeant, I'm getting a clear signal from base. They're trying to reach us with updated intelligence. Put it on speaker, Rodriguez ordered, hoping for information that might change their tactical situation. Morrison adjusted his equipment, and the voice of their operations officer came through the static and interference. 7 Alpha, this is base. We're showing increased activity throughout your operational area. Multiple enemy communications indicating coordinated operations. Recommend immediate withdrawal to Extraction Point Bravo. Rodriguez knew Extraction Point Bravo. It was a clearing suitable for helicopter landing approximately 5 kilometers from their current position. In good weather, it was a manageable movement. In current conditions, with enemy forces pursuing, it would be a race against time and weather. Base 7 Alpha. Confirm Extraction Point Bravo. What's the timeline for extraction assets? Rodriguez responded, needing to know if helicopter support would be available in these weather conditions. The response came back broken by static. Weather is limiting aviation operations. Earliest possible extraction window is dawn, approximately 6 hours. Rodriguez felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders. 6 hours was a long time to evade enemy forces in hostile territory during a mountain blizzard. His team would need to stay mobile, avoid contact, and survive the weather until extraction became possible. Foster, Chun, how are you holding up? Rodriguez asked, concerned about his team's physical condition for the long movement ahead. Foster flexed his injured hand, testing the bandage Williams had applied. Hands stiff, but functional. I can maintain pace. Chun was breathing heavily from the exertion of moving with his equipment load, but his voice was steady. I'm good to go, Staff Sergeant. Equipment's secure and ready. The team continued their withdrawal, moving as quickly as the terrain and weather would allow. The snow was now falling so heavily that visibility was reduced to less than 30 meters. While this provided concealment from their pursuers, it also made navigation extremely difficult. Rodriguez was using his GPS device to maintain their heading, but he knew that electronic equipment could fail, especially in extreme weather conditions. He was also using traditional navigation techniques, noting terrain features, and maintaining awareness of their general direction relative to known landmarks. Movement to our left flank, Foster reported, his voice tense. Looks like multiple personnel paralleling our route. Rodriguez immediately adjusted their formation, positioning the team to defend against threats from multiple directions. The enemy was apparently using multiple teams to track and intercept them, a sophisticated approach that suggested significant planning and resources. Turner, what's the status on our original pursuers? Rodriguez asked. Turner had been maintaining observation of their back trail while the team moved. Still moving in our direction, but they've slowed down. Looks like they're being more careful about their movement, possibly trying to coordinate with the flanking force Foster spotted. Rodriguez was beginning to understand the enemy's tactics. They weren't trying to catch the SEAL team immediately. Instead, they were using multiple teams to track and herd them toward a predetermined location where they could be engaged with superior numbers and advantageous positioning. Williams was monitoring the team's physical condition as they moved. Staff Sergeant, we need to consider shelter soon. This weather is getting dangerous. We're all showing early signs of cold weather exposure. Rodriguez knew Williams was right. The wind chill was dropping the effective temperature well below survival levels for prolonged exposure. They needed to find shelter, but they also needed to keep moving to avoid being trapped by pursuing enemy forces. Options for shelter? Rodriguez asked, hoping someone had spotted terrain features that might provide protection from the weather. Chen pointed toward a cluster of large rocks visible through the snow. That rock formation might provide some wind protection. We could establish a temporary position there. Rodriguez studied the area Chen had indicated. It would provide some shelter from the wind, but it could also become a trap if enemy forces surrounded their position. The decision was becoming a balance between immediate survival needs and tactical security. Movement ahead, Foster reported suddenly. Crossing our path approximately 200 meters forward. Rodriguez immediately halted the team and moved forward to observe the threat Foster had identified. Through the swirling snow, he could see figures moving across their intended route. The enemy was successfully positioning forces to cut off their withdrawal routes. How many? Rodriguez whispered. Foster was using his weapon scope to get a better view through the weather. At least 4, possibly more. They're moving in tactical formation, definitely military-trained personnel. Rodriguez realized that his team was being systematically surrounded. The enemy had anticipated their withdrawal routes and positioned forces to intercept them. The storm was working in the enemy's favor, allowing them to move unseen while limiting the SEAL team's ability to detect and avoid them. Morrison was still monitoring enemy radio communications, trying to piece together their coordination and intentions. They're using multiple call signs and coordinate systems. This is definitely a planned operation with significant resources. Rodriguez made a tactical decision that went against his training but matched the reality of their situation. We're going to ground, find the best available shelter, and establish a defensive position. We'll wait for the weather to clear and reassess our options. The team moved toward the rock formation Chun had identified, maintaining security while seeking shelter from the increasingly dangerous weather conditions. The rocks provided some protection from the wind, but they were still exposed to the falling snow and sub-zero temperatures. Williams immediately began assessing the team for cold weather injuries. Everyone needs to check extremities for frostbite. Keep moving fingers and toes, and let me know immediately if you lose feeling in any area. Rodriguez was establishing a defensive perimeter when Turner suddenly grabbed his arm. Staff Sergeant, I'm seeing what looks like a single individual on the peak above us, not moving with any of the other groups we've identified. Rodriguez focused his binoculars on the area Turner indicated. High above their position, barely visible through the snow and wind, he could make out what appeared to be a lone figure positioned on an outcrop of rock. The individual wasn't moving, suggesting they were in a stationary observation or firing position. Range to target? Rodriguez asked. Turner was calculating the distance using his scope's ranging system. Approximately 1,000 meters, maybe slightly more. Definitely within effective range for a skilled marksman with the right equipment. Rodriguez felt another piece of the tactical puzzle falling into place. The enemy hadn't just positioned forces to surround and capture his team. They had positioned a sniper in an overwatch position to engage them if they tried to fight their way out. The lone figure on the mountain peak represented the most dangerous threat they faced. A skilled sniper with good equipment could engage individual team members from a position that was virtually impossible to assault in these weather conditions. The combination of distance, elevation, and weather would make counter-sniper operations extremely difficult. Williams, Chun, Foster, Rodriguez called quietly. We need maximum concealment. That position above us has clear observation of our location. The team immediately began improving their concealment, using the natural terrain and what little vegetation was available to break up their visual signatures. In snow conditions, even small movements could be visible to an observer with good optics. Morrison was still working with his communication equipment, but the combination of weather and terrain was making contact with their base increasingly difficult. Signals getting weaker. I think we're on our own until this weather clears. Rodriguez was studying their tactical situation when he noticed something that changed everything. The enemy forces that had been moving to surround them were no longer visible. Either they had taken cover from the weather, or they were repositioning for a coordinated assault. "Turner, Foster, Chun," Rodriguez called. "I need eyes on all approaches." Something's changed. The team immediately increased their vigilance, scanning their sectors for signs of enemy movement. The storm was providing excellent concealment, but it worked both ways. Enemy forces could be moving very close to their position without being detected. "Staff Sergeant," Turner said quietly, his voice carrying a note of urgency. "I think they're setting up for a coordinated assault. All the movement we were tracking has stopped. That usually means they're getting into final positions." Rodriguez knew Turner was right. The enemy had spent time positioning their forces, and now they were preparing to execute their plan. His team was outnumbered, outpositioned, and facing extreme weather conditions that limited their mobility and options. Williams was checking his medical supplies and weapon systems, preparing for what seemed like inevitable contact. "If they assault our position, we're going to have limited options for casualty evacuation. The weather's too bad for helicopter support." Rodriguez was mentally reviewing their available options when Foster suddenly pointed toward the valley below. "Staff Sergeant, the convoy vehicles are moving again. Looks like they're repositioning to block potential escape routes." Through his binoculars, Rodriguez could see that Foster was correct. The convoy that had initially appeared to be having mechanical difficulties was now moving in a coordinated fashion, positioning vehicles to control key terrain features in the valley. Chun was checking his explosive ordnance, ensuring that his equipment was protected from the weather but ready for immediate use if needed. "If they assault our position, I can provide some area denial, but my equipment's limited for this kind of defensive operation." Rodriguez was calculating their ammunition and supplies when Morrison suddenly looked up from his radio equipment with an expression of concern. "Staff Sergeant, I'm picking up radio traffic indicating they're preparing for a final assault. Multiple units reporting ready status." Rodriguez felt the tactical situation crystallizing around them. His team was surrounded, outnumbered, and facing an imminent assault in weather conditions that made movement and communication extremely difficult. The sniper position above them dominated their location, and enemy forces were positioned to prevent escape in any direction. But as Rodriguez was preparing to give orders for their final defensive positions, Turner suddenly grabbed his shoulder and pointed toward the mountain peak where they had spotted the lone figure. "That sniper position," Turner said urgently. "Something's wrong. The figure's not moving, and I'm seeing what looks like a muzzle flash reflection in the snow." Rodriguez immediately focused his attention on the peak above them, trying to understand what Turner had observed. Through the swirling snow and wind, the lone figure remained motionless, but something about the situation felt different. Rodriguez studied the figure on the mountain peak through his binoculars, trying to understand what had caught Turner's attention. The lone individual remained completely motionless despite the harsh wind and snow, which struck Rodriguez as unusual. Even experienced snipers had to make small adjustments for weather and comfort during long observation periods. "Turner, what exactly did you see?" Rodriguez asked, needing to understand if they were facing a new threat or if something had changed in their tactical situation. Turner was focusing his scope on the peak position, using maximum magnification to cut through the snow and wind. "The muzzle flash reflection I saw wasn't from that position firing at us. It looked like sunlight or artificial light reflecting off a scope or weapon system, but the angle was wrong for engaging our position." Rodriguez felt a spark of confusion. If the sniper wasn't positioned to engage their location, what was he doing? The peak position offered excellent observation of the entire valley, including the areas where enemy forces were moving to surround the SEAL team. "Morrison, any change in enemy communications?" Rodriguez asked, hoping radio intercepts might provide insight into what was happening. Morrison was monitoring multiple frequencies, trying to piece together the enemy's coordination and intentions. "Actually, yes. I'm hearing some confusion in their communications. Sounds like they're trying to re-establish contact with someone, possibly the Overwatch position." Rodriguez began to consider possibilities he hadn't thought of before. The figure on the peak might not be part of the enemy force that was surrounding them. In these mountains, there were coalition special operations teams, Afghan National Army units, and even CIA operatives conducting various missions. The lone figure could be from any of these groups. Williams, Rodriguez called quietly. Do we have any intelligence on friendly forces operating in this area? Williams checked the mission briefing materials he carried. Nothing specific, but there's always the possibility of uncoordinated operations. Special operations forces don't always share operational details, especially for sensitive missions. Rodriguez was weighing this possibility when Foster suddenly held up his hand for silence. Movement from multiple directions. Looks like they're beginning their assault. Through the swirling snow, Rodriguez could see figures moving toward their position from 3 different directions. The enemy had positioned their forces well, approaching from areas that limited the SEAL team's ability to engage multiple threats simultaneously. Defensive positions, Rodriguez ordered. Chun, Foster, cover the eastern approach. Turner, Williams, take the north. I'll cover the western route and coordinate. The team moved into their prepared positions among the rocks, using the natural terrain to provide cover and concealment. Each man had a clear sector of responsibility and understood the plan for engaging multiple attackers in their rocky defensive position. Morrison continued monitoring enemy communications while maintaining his position with the radio equipment. They're coordinating the assault now. Multiple teams reporting ready to move. Rodriguez was preparing to engage the approaching forces when Turner suddenly called out urgently. Staff Sergeant, something's happening on that peak position. The figure's moving, and I think I see a different weapon system. Rodriguez glanced toward the peak position while maintaining his watch on the approaching enemy forces. Through his binoculars, he could see that Turner was correct. The lone figure was no longer in a static observation position, but appeared to be preparing some kind of equipment. What kind of weapon system? Rodriguez asked, needing to know if they were about to face fire from an elevated position. Turner was studying the peak through his scope, trying to identify what he was observing. Looks like a long-range rifle system, definitely not standard Taliban equipment. The profile looks more like coalition sniper weapons. Rodriguez felt a possibility beginning to form in his mind. If the figure on the peak was using coalition equipment, there was a chance they might be facing a friendly force that could provide assistance rather than another threat. Morrison, try to establish communication on coalition frequencies, Rodriguez ordered. See if you can make contact with whoever's on that peak. Morrison began cycling through various radio frequencies used by coalition forces, trying to establish contact with the unknown individual. The storm was still interfering with radio communications, but he might be able to reach someone at the closer distance to the peak position. The enemy forces continued their approach, now close enough that Rodriguez could make out individual weapons and equipment. They were moving professionally, using tactical spacing and fireteam formations that suggested military training rather than militia fighters. First team approximately 100 meters out, Foster reported from his position covering the eastern approach. Rodriguez was preparing to initiate defensive fires when Morrison suddenly grabbed his shoulder. I've got contact. Coalition frequency, identifying as Stalker 1. Rodriguez immediately took Morrison's radio handset. Stalker 1, this is 7 Alpha. What's your position and status? The voice that came back through the static was calm and professional, with a slight accent Rodriguez couldn't immediately place. 7 Alpha, Stalker 1. I'm in Overwatch position approximately 1,000 meters northeast of your location. I count multiple hostiles approaching your position from 3 vectors. Rodriguez felt relief flooding through him. They weren't alone. Someone was in position to provide support, possibly changing their tactical situation dramatically. Stalker 1, 7 Alpha. Can you provide fire support? We're about to be engaged by superior numbers. The response was immediate. 7 Alpha. I have clear observation of all hostile positions. I can engage, but you need to mark your position and stay low. This weather is affecting visibility even with advanced optics. Rodriguez quickly coordinated with his team to mark their position using an infrared strobe that would be visible through night vision equipment, but not to the naked eye. The strobe would allow the sniper to identify their exact location and avoid engaging friendly forces. Chun, pop the IR strobe, Rodriguez ordered. Everyone else, get as low as possible and Prepare for incoming sniper fire on enemy positions. Chun activated the infrared marker, placing it in a position that would clearly identify their defensive location to anyone observing with night vision equipment. The strobe was designed to be visible to coalition forces while remaining invisible to enemies without proper equipment. Stalker 1, 7 Alpha. IR marker is active. Can you identify our position? The sniper's response confirmed Rodriguez's hopes. 7 Alpha, I have your position marked. Beginning engagement of hostile forces. Keep your heads down. Rodriguez had barely finished relaying the warning to his team when the first shot echoed across the valley. The sound was distinctive, the sharp crack of a high-powered rifle cutting through the wind and snow. Somewhere in the approaching enemy force, someone had just been engaged by a precision marksman. Contact, Foster called out. Eastern team is taking cover. Looks like they have a casualty. Through his binoculars, Rodriguez could see the enemy team that had been approaching from the east scrambling for cover among the rocks. One figure was down, and the others were trying to locate the source of the sniper fire. The sniper fired again, the muzzle flash barely visible through the snow and wind. Rodriguez couldn't see the impact, but the enemy team approaching from the north suddenly changed direction, seeking cover from the elevated threat. Morrison, what are you hearing on enemy communications? Rodriguez asked, wanting to understand how the sniper fire was affecting enemy coordination. Morrison was monitoring enemy frequencies, and his expression showed satisfaction. They're confused and trying to identify the sniper position. Sounds like they didn't expect to face precision fire from that location. The psychological effect of sniper fire was often as important as the physical casualties it caused. Enemy forces that came under precise, long-range fire often became cautious and defensive, losing the initiative and momentum of their assault. Stalker 1, 7 Alpha. Excellent shooting. What's your assessment of remaining hostile forces? The sniper's response showed he was maintaining careful observation of the tactical situation. 7 Alpha. I count at least 12 remaining hostiles in 3 groups. They're seeking cover but maintaining positions around your location. This isn't over. Rodriguez knew the sniper was right. While the precision fire had disrupted the enemy assault, they still had superior numbers and were positioned to maintain their siege of the SEAL team's position. The sniper fire had bought them time, but it hadn't eliminated the threat. Williams was monitoring the team's ammunition and supplies. Staff Sergeant, we're in good shape for a defensive engagement. But if this turns into a prolonged firefight, we'll need to manage our resources carefully. Rodriguez was calculating their options when Turner called out another observation. Movement from the convoy position. Looks like they're sending additional personnel to reinforce the assault teams. Through his binoculars, Rodriguez could see figures moving from the vehicles in the valley below. The enemy was committing additional resources to the engagement, possibly including heavier weapons or specialized personnel. Stalker 1, 7 Alpha. We're seeing reinforcements moving from the convoy position in the valley. Can you observe and engage? The sniper's response indicated he was tracking the new threats. 7 Alpha, I have observation on the convoy area. I can engage selected targets, but I need to manage ammunition carefully. I'm operating independently with limited resupply. Rodriguez understood the sniper's concern. Long-range precision shooting required specialized ammunition, and resupply in these mountain conditions would be impossible. Every shot had to count, both for tactical effect and ammunition conservation. Chin was preparing his explosive ordnance for defensive use when he spotted something that changed his assessment of their situation. Staff Sergeant, I'm seeing what looks like a mortar position being established in the valley. They might be preparing to use indirect fire against our position. Rodriguez immediately focused his attention on the area Chun had indicated. Through the snow and wind, he could make out figures setting up what appeared to be a small mortar system. If the enemy could accurately target their position with indirect fire, their rocky shelter could become a death trap. Stalker 1, 7 Alpha. Urgent. We have enemy mortar position being established in the valley. Grid reference. Rodriguez provided the coordinates he estimated for the mortar position. The sniper's response was immediate and reassuring. 7 Alpha. I have the mortar position in sight. Engaging immediately. The sound of the sniper rifle echoed across the valley again, followed quickly by a second shot. Rodriguez could see the enemy mortar crew scrambling for cover, their equipment apparently abandoned as they sought protection from the precision fire. Mortar position neutralized, came the sniper's report. Crew casualties confirmed. Foster was maintaining observation of the enemy forces around their position when he noticed a change in their behavior. They're pulling back slightly, but not withdrawing. Looks like they're regrouping for a different approach. Rodriguez was trying to understand the enemy's new tactics when Morrison suddenly looked up from his radio with urgent news. Staff Sergeant, I'm getting radio traffic about aviation assets. Sounds like they might be trying to bring in helicopter support. The possibility of enemy aviation support was a serious concern. Coalition forces had air superiority in most areas of Afghanistan, but Taliban and other groups occasionally had access to helicopters, either captured equipment or aircraft provided by external supporters. Stalker 1, 7 Alpha. We're hearing enemy communications about possible aviation support. Can you confirm any aircraft in the area? The sniper's response carried a note of concern. 7 Alpha. I can hear rotor noise in the distance, but visibility is too poor to identify aircraft type or intentions. Recommend you prepare for possible air assault. Rodriguez quickly assessed their defensive position for protection against aerial threats. The rocky terrain provided some overhead cover, but a determined helicopter assault could be devastating to their small force. Williams was checking his medical supplies and preparing for potential casualties when he noticed something about the weather conditions. Staff Sergeant, I think the storm might be starting to break. Visibility seems to be improving slightly. Rodriguez looked around and realized Williams was correct. The snow was still falling, but the wind was decreasing, and he could see farther than he had been able to just minutes before. Improved visibility would help them coordinate with the sniper, but it would also make them more visible to enemy forces. Turner was using the improved visibility to get a better assessment of enemy positions when he made an important observation. Staff Sergeant, I can see the sniper position more clearly now. That's definitely coalition equipment, and the individual appears to be using advanced camouflage and positioning techniques. Rodriguez was studying the sniper position when he noticed something else about the lone figure on the peak. Despite the harsh conditions and extended engagement, the sniper was maintaining perfect position and continuing to provide accurate fire when needed. This suggested exceptional training and experience. Chun, Foster, what's the status of enemy forces in your sectors? Rodriguez asked, needing to update his understanding of their tactical situation. Chun was observing the eastern approaches where the enemy had initially taken casualties. They're still in position, but maintaining cover. I think they're waiting for some kind of signal or support before resuming their assault. Foster was watching the northern approach where another enemy team was positioned. Similar situation here. They have us fixed in position, but they're not pressing the assault. Something's changed in their plan. Rodriguez was analyzing the enemy's change in behavior when Morrison provided information that explained everything. Staff Sergeant, I'm intercepting communications indicating they're waiting for additional support before continuing their assault. Sounds like they're concerned about the sniper threat. The precision fire from the elevated position had fundamentally changed the tactical balance. The enemy forces that had been confident in their numerical superiority and positioning were now dealing with a threat they hadn't anticipated and couldn't easily counter. Stalker 1, 7 Alpha. Enemy forces appear to be waiting for additional support. What's your assessment of the tactical situation? The sniper's response showed he was maintaining careful observation of the entire battlefield. 7 Alpha, I concur with your assessment. They're being cautious now, but they're not withdrawing. I suspect they're waiting for heavier weapons or additional personnel before resuming their assault. Rodriguez was considering their options when Williams made an observation that provided new possibilities. Staff Sergeant, if the weather continues to clear, we might have options for helicopter extraction that weren't available before. Rodriguez immediately had Morrison attempt contact with their base to determine if extraction support might become available. The improving weather could change their entire situation if helicopter support could reach their location. Base 7 Alpha. Weather conditions appear to be improving. Request status update on extraction capabilities. The response took several minutes to come through the static and interference, but when it arrived, it provided hope. 7 Alpha, weather is marginal but improving. Extraction assets may be available within 2 hours if conditions continue to improve. Rodriguez felt the tactical picture shifting in their favor. They had unexpected sniper support, enemy forces that were being cautious rather than aggressive, and the possibility of helicopter extraction if they could maintain their position for another 2 hours. But, as Rodriguez was beginning to feel optimistic about their situation, Turner suddenly called out with new intelligence that changed everything once again. "Staff Sergeant, I'm seeing new movement in the valley. Multiple vehicles approaching, and they appear to be carrying heavier weapons than we've seen before." Rodriguez immediately focused his binoculars on the valley where Turner had spotted the approaching vehicles. Through the clearing snow, he could make out what appeared to be 2 pickup trucks and a larger vehicle, all moving rapidly along the mountain trail toward their position. The lead vehicle had what looked like a recoilless rifle or heavy machine gun mounted in its bed. "Count and weapons identification?" Rodriguez asked Turner, needing precise information about this new threat. Turner was using his scope to get detailed observations of the approaching convoy. 3 vehicles confirmed. Lead vehicle has what appears to be a recoilless rifle, possibly Soviet-era SPG-9. Second vehicle has a heavy machine gun, looks like a DSHK. Third vehicle appears to be personnel transport. Rodriguez felt his stomach tighten. A recoilless rifle could destroy their rocky defensive position with a single well-placed shot. The DSHK heavy machine gun could suppress their position while enemy infantry moved in for the assault. This was exactly the kind of heavy weapons support the enemy forces had been waiting for. "Stalker 1, 7 Alpha. We have enemy heavy weapons approaching from the valley. 3 vehicles, including recoilless rifle and heavy machine gun. Can you engage?" The sniper's response carried a note of concern that matched Rodriguez's own assessment. "7 Alpha. I have observation on the approaching vehicles. The range is at the limit of my effective engagement envelope, and these weather conditions are still affecting accuracy. I can attempt to engage, but success is not guaranteed." Rodriguez knew that engaging vehicles with sniper fire was challenging under the best conditions. At long range, in poor weather, with moving targets, it would require exceptional skill and some luck. But they needed to disrupt the enemy's heavy weapons before they could be brought into action. Morrison was monitoring enemy communications with increased urgency. They're coordinating the arrival of the heavy weapons with a renewed assault by the infantry teams. Sounds like they're planning a final coordinated attack. Rodriguez could see the tactical picture crystallizing. The enemy had been waiting for heavy weapons support to arrive before resuming their assault. Now they had the firepower to destroy the SEAL team's defensive position while their infantry moved in from multiple directions. "Williams, check our defensive positions for protection against heavy weapons," Rodriguez ordered. Though he already knew that their rocky shelter would provide little protection against a recoilless rifle. Williams quickly assessed their position and confirmed Rodriguez's fears. "These rocks will provide some protection against small arms fire, but a direct hit from a recoilless rifle will be devastating. We need to consider alternative positions or tactics." Rodriguez was calculating their extremely limited options when Chun made a suggestion that offered some possibility. "Staff Sergeant, if I can get close enough to the vehicles, my explosive ordnance might be able to disable them. But it would require leaving our defensive position." Rodriguez immediately rejected the idea. "Negative. The risk is too high, and we need your firepower for the defensive engagement." Foster was maintaining observation of the infantry forces positioned around their location when he noticed they were beginning to move again. Enemy infantry is repositioning. Looks like they're preparing for coordinated assault once the heavy weapons are in position. Rodriguez realized they were facing a perfectly coordinated enemy operation. The infantry would fix them in position while the heavy weapons destroyed their cover, followed by a final assault that would overwhelm their small force with superior numbers and firepower. "Stalker 1, 7 Alpha. We need immediate engagement of those vehicles. Our position won't survive a recoilless rifle attack." The sniper's response was immediate. 7 Alpha, attempting engagement now. Targeting the lead vehicle first. Rodriguez heard the distinctive crack of the sniper rifle echoing across the valley. Through his binoculars, he could see the approaching vehicles continue moving, apparently unaffected by the shot. Miss, came the sniper's report. Wind compensation was insufficient. Adjusting for second shot. The second shot followed quickly, and Rodriguez could see the lead vehicle suddenly swerve and slow down. One of the front tires appeared to have been hit, causing the driver to lose control on the icy mountain road. Partial success, the sniper reported. Lead vehicle is disabled, but the weapon system is still functional. Engaging second vehicle. Rodriguez watched as the convoy tried to reorganize. The disabled lead vehicle was blocking the narrow mountain trail, forcing the other vehicles to maneuver around it. This gave the sniper additional time to engage the remaining threats. The sniper fired again, and Rodriguez saw the windshield of the second vehicle shatter. The vehicle immediately stopped, and figures began scrambling out of the cab, seeking cover among the rocks along the road. Good hit on second vehicle, the sniper reported. Crew casualties, but the heavy machine gun is still intact. Rodriguez could see that while the sniper was disrupting the enemy's plan, the heavy weapons were still a threat. Enemy personnel were working to establish the weapons in stationary positions where they could engage the SEAL team's defensive position. Morrison was receiving updated communications from their base when he suddenly looked up with urgent information. Staff Sergeant, base is reporting that extraction assets are airborne and en route. Estimated arrival in 30 minutes. Rodriguez felt a surge of hope, but 30 minutes was a long time when facing superior enemy forces with heavy weapons. They needed to survive the next half hour before help could arrive. Turner, Foster, Chun, Rodriguez called. We need to hold this position for 30 minutes. Extraction is en route. Turner was maintaining observation of the sniper position on the peak when he noticed something significant. Staff Sergeant, I think our sniper friend is repositioning. Looks like he's moving to a different firing position. Rodriguez focused his attention on the peak where the sniper had been positioned. Turner was correct. The figure was no longer in the original location, but appeared to be moving along the ridge line to a new position. Stalker 1, 7 Alpha. We observe you repositioning. What's your status? The sniper's response explained his tactical decision. 7 Alpha, my current position is compromised. Enemy forces have identified my location and are maneuvering to engage me. Moving to alternate firing position to maintain support for your location. Rodriguez realized that the sniper was facing his own tactical challenges. The enemy had identified the source of the precision fire that had been disrupting their operations, and was now trying to eliminate that threat. Williams was checking the team's ammunition and supplies when he made an important observation about their tactical situation. Staff Sergeant, if we can hold our current position, we have good defensive fields of fire. But if they bring that recoilless rifle into action, we'll need to relocate. Rodriguez was studying the terrain around their position, looking for alternative defensive positions they could move to if their current location became untenable. Chen was preparing his explosive ordnance for defensive use when he spotted enemy personnel working to establish the recoilless rifle in a firing position. They're setting up the recoilless rifle approximately 400 meters south of our position. Once they have it in position, they'll have a direct line of fire on our location. Rodriguez knew they were running out of time. The enemy was systematically establishing their heavy weapons while their infantry maintained positions around the SEAL team's defensive location. Within minutes, they would be facing coordinated fire from multiple weapon systems. Foster was observing the enemy infantry positions when he noticed they were beginning to move closer. Enemy teams are advancing under cover. They're using the heavy weapons preparation to mask their movement. Rodriguez realized the enemy was executing a textbook assault. The heavy weapons would suppress or destroy the defenders while infantry moved into assault positions. Once the recoilless rifle fired, the infantry would attack from multiple directions simultaneously. Morrison, update base on our situation. Tell them we're facing immediate heavy weapons assault and need priority extraction. Morrison was relaying the urgent message when the first round from the heavy machine gun cracked overhead. The DSHK was now in position and beginning to engage their defensive location with suppressive fire. Contact. Heavy machine gun engaging our position. Foster called out as bullets began striking the rocks around them. Rodriguez could hear the distinctive sound of the DSHK rounds impacting near their position. The heavy machine gun was firing in bursts, trying to suppress the SEAL team while enemy personnel completed the setup of the recoilless rifle. "Keep your heads down," Rodriguez ordered. "Don't return fire until we have clear targets. Save ammunition for the assault." Turner was trying to maintain observation of enemy positions while staying protected from the heavy machine gun fire. "I can see personnel moving around the recoilless rifle position. They're almost ready to bring it into action." Rodriguez knew that once the recoilless rifle fired, their defensive position would be compromised. They needed to be prepared to move immediately after the first shot, but movement under fire would be extremely dangerous. Williams was ensuring that his medical equipment was ready for immediate use. In the coming engagement, there would likely be casualties, and he needed to be prepared to provide medical care under fire. Chen was positioning his explosive ordnance to provide maximum defensive effect when the engagement reached its climax. His equipment could help defend their position, but only if the enemy infantry moved close enough for effective engagement. Rodriguez was preparing his team for the inevitable assault when the sniper's voice came over the radio with urgent information. 7 Alpha, Stalker 1. I'm in position to engage the recoilless rifle crew, but I need you to provide a distraction. They're expecting fire from my direction. Rodriguez immediately understood what the sniper was requesting. If the SEAL team could draw the attention of the recoilless rifle crew, the sniper might be able to eliminate the most dangerous threat they were facing. "Foster, Chun, on my signal, put suppressive fire on the recoilless rifle position." Just enough to get their attention. Rodriguez waited until he could see personnel around the recoilless rifle looking in their direction, then gave the signal. Foster and Chun immediately began firing controlled bursts at the enemy weapon position. The response was immediate. The recoilless rifle crew took cover and began preparing to return fire, focusing their attention on the source of the incoming rounds. At that moment, Rodriguez heard the sniper rifle fire from its new position. "Direct hit," came the sniper's report. "Recoilless rifle crew neutralized." Rodriguez felt a surge of relief, but he knew the engagement was far from over. The enemy still had the heavy machine gun in action and infantry positioned around their location. The immediate threat of the recoilless rifle was eliminated, but they were still facing a determined assault. Morrison was maintaining communication with the extraction aircraft when he received an update that changed their timeline. "Staff Sergeant, extraction bird is 15 minutes out, but they're reporting difficulty with the landing zone due to terrain and weather." Rodriguez realized that even when the helicopter arrived, extraction would be challenging. The rocky terrain and continuing weather would make landing difficult, and they would need to secure the area before the aircraft could safely extract his team. Turner was observing the enemy infantry positions when he noticed they were beginning their final assault movement. "Multiple teams moving toward our position. They're coming from 3 directions simultaneously." Rodriguez could see that the enemy was executing their assault despite the loss of the recoilless rifle. They still had numerical superiority and the support of the heavy machine gun. The engagement was about to reach its climax. "All positions, prepare for close engagement," Rodriguez ordered. "Controlled fire. Make every shot count." The enemy infantry was now moving within effective rifle range, using tactical movement and the continued fire from the heavy machine gun to support their assault. Rodriguez could see individual fighters advancing from multiple directions, their movements coordinated and professional. Williams was ready to provide medical support when the first enemy rounds began impacting directly on their position. The assault had begun, and the next few minutes would determine whether the SEAL team could hold their defensive position until extraction arrived. "Specify enemy positions around the landing zone," Rodriguez demanded, while simultaneously engaging an enemy fighter who had moved within 50 meters of their position. The sniper's response came between his own shots as he continued engaging targets around the SEAL team's defensive position. 7 Alpha, I count at least 2 teams with RPGs positioned on ridge lines overlooking the primary landing zone. Additional personnel with small arms covering secondary approaches. Rodriguez immediately understood the tactical nightmare they were facing. The extraction helicopter would be flying into a carefully prepared ambush, with rocket-propelled grenades positioned to engage the aircraft from multiple directions. Even if the helicopter survived the initial attack, it would be unable to land safely or extract his team. Morrison was frantically trying to establish communication with the incoming aircraft while simultaneously staying low to avoid the continuing fire from enemy forces around their position. I need to warn the extraction bird, but communications are still sketchy with all this interference. Rodriguez was engaging enemy fighters with controlled bursts from his rifle when he made a decision that went against every tactical principle he had been taught. Instead of focusing on his immediate survival, he needed to coordinate a complex operation to save the helicopter crew and his own team. Turner, Foster, maintain defensive fire. Chun, prepare smoke for concealment. Williams, get ready to move wounded. Rodriguez then focused his attention on the radio, trying to establish clear communication with both the sniper and the incoming helicopter. The next few minutes would require perfect coordination between multiple elements under extremely difficult conditions. Morrison, priority communication with extraction bird. They need to know about the ambush. Morrison was working desperately with his equipment, adjusting antennas and power settings to cut through the atmospheric interference caused by the continuing storm. Finally, he made contact with the helicopter. Extraction 747 Alpha. Abort approach to primary landing zone. Enemy forces with RPGs in position for ambush. The helicopter pilot's response showed he understood the severity of the situation. 7 Alpha, Extraction 74. Roger, aborting approach. What are your alternatives? Rodriguez was studying the terrain through his binoculars while continuing to engage enemy forces when the sniper provided information that offered a possible solution. 7 Alpha, Stalker 1. I have observation of a secondary landing area approximately 800 meters northeast of your position. Terrain appears suitable for helicopter operations, and I don't observe enemy forces in that area. Rodriguez quickly shifted his focus to the area the sniper had identified. Through the clearing weather, he could see what appeared to be a relatively flat area of snow-covered ground that might accommodate a helicopter landing. Stalker 1, can you provide overwatch and fire support for movement to that location? Rodriguez asked, knowing that moving his team under fire would be extremely dangerous. 7 Alpha, affirmative. I can provide covering fire, but you'll need to move quickly. Enemy forces are repositioning to cut off your escape routes. Rodriguez was calculating the distance and time required for movement when Chun provided information that complicated their situation further. Staff Sergeant, enemy forces are bringing up the heavy machine gun. They're trying to establish it in a position that will dominate any movement from our location. Rodriguez could see enemy personnel working to move the DSHK machine gun to a position that would allow them to engage his team if they attempted to leave their defensive position. The enemy understood that the SEAL team would eventually have to move and was positioning assets to prevent their extraction. Foster was maintaining suppressive fire on enemy positions when he made an observation that provided Rodriguez with tactical intelligence. Enemy infantry is staying in covered positions. They're not pressing the assault. I think they're waiting for something. Rodriguez realized that Foster was correct. Despite having numerical superiority and good positions, the enemy forces were being cautious about their final assault. They were waiting for additional support or specific conditions before committing to the attack. Turner was observing enemy movements when he identified what the enemy forces were waiting for. Multiple vehicles approaching from the north. Looks like significant reinforcements, including what might be additional heavy weapons. Rodriguez felt the tactical situation deteriorating rapidly. They were already outnumbered and facing heavy weapons. Additional enemy forces would make their situation hopeless, extraction or no extraction. Morrison, update the extraction bird on enemy reinforcements. They need to understand the full scope of what we're facing. Morrison relayed the information while the helicopter pilot maintained a holding pattern at a safe distance from the ambush areas. Extraction 747 Alpha. Enemy reinforcements approaching with additional heavy weapons. Recommend immediate extraction attempt before they arrive. Williams was monitoring the team's physical condition and ammunition status when he provided Rodriguez with information that influenced his decision-making. Staff Sergeant, we're in good shape for immediate movement. Everyone's mobile, ammunition is adequate, and weather conditions are continuing to improve. Rodriguez was weighing their options when the sniper provided intelligence that forced an immediate decision. 7 Alpha, Stalker 1. Enemy reinforcements will be in position within 10 minutes. If you're going to move, it has to be now. Rodriguez made the decision that would determine whether his team survived or was overrun in these remote mountains. All positions, prepare for movement to alternate extraction site. Chun, deploy smoke on my signal. Everyone else, covering fire and movement drill alpha. Movement drill alpha was a practice procedure that allowed the team to move under fire while maintaining suppressive fire on enemy positions. It required precise timing and coordination, but it was their best chance to reach the alternate landing zone before enemy reinforcements arrived. Rodriguez was coordinating his team's preparation for movement when Morrison received a communication that changed their timeline dramatically. Staff Sergeant Extraction Bird reports he's taking fire from the areas where enemy forces are positioned around the primary landing zone. They're engaging his aircraft right now. Rodriguez immediately shifted his attention to the radio. Extraction 7-4, 7 Alpha. What's your status? The helicopter pilot's voice was tense, but controlled. 7 Alpha, we're taking ground fire from multiple positions. No hits so far, but we're maneuvering to avoid RPG engagement. We need that alternate landing zone clear before we can attempt extraction. Rodriguez understood that the helicopter crew was risking their lives to extract his team, even though they were facing significant ground fire from prepared positions. The least he could do was get his team to the alternate landing zone and provide security for the extraction. Stalker 1, 7 Alpha. We're beginning movement to alternate extraction site. Request immediate suppressive fire on enemy positions. The sniper's response was immediate. 7 Alpha, engaging enemy positions now. Move quickly. Rodriguez heard the sniper rifle firing rapidly, much faster than the careful, aimed shots that had characterized the engagement up to this point. The sniper was providing suppressive fire rather than precision engagement, sacrificing accuracy for rate of fire to support the team's movement. Chun, smoke now, Rodriguez ordered. Chun deployed smoke grenades that immediately began obscuring their defensive position and the surrounding area. The wind was still strong enough to disperse the smoke quickly, but it would provide temporary concealment for their initial movement. Foster, Turner, bounding overwatch. Williams, Chun, prepare to move. The team began their movement using practiced fire and movement techniques. Foster and Turner provided covering fire while Rodriguez led Williams and Chun toward the alternate extraction site. Morrison maintained communications while moving with the advancing element. Rodriguez could hear bullets impacting around them as enemy forces engaged their movement, but the combination of smoke, sniper fire, and their own suppressive fire was disrupting enemy accuracy. They were moving as quickly as the rocky terrain allowed, but progress was slower than Rodriguez had hoped. Stalker 1, 7 Alpha. We're taking fire during movement. Can you identify and engage enemy positions? The sniper was maintaining continuous fire on enemy positions, switching between targets as opportunities presented themselves. 7 Alpha, I'm engaging multiple targets, but they're using good cover. I'm suppressing rather than eliminating. Rodriguez could see they were making progress toward the alternate landing zone, but enemy forces were adjusting their positions to engage the moving team. The engagement was becoming a running battle across difficult terrain in continuing bad weather. Turner was providing rear security when he called out urgent information. Staff Sergeant, the heavy machine gun is moving to a position where it can engage our route to the landing zone. Rodriguez immediately understood the threat. If the DSHK machine gun could establish a position with clear fields of fire across their movement route, it could pin them down in the open ground between their defensive position and the extraction site. Stalker 1, 7 Alpha. Priority target. Heavy machine gun repositioning to engage our movement. The sniper immediately shifted his fire to the machine gun crew, but Rodriguez could see that the distance and weather conditions were making precision engagement extremely difficult. Several shots impacted near the weapon position, but the crew continued their setup. Williams was assisting Chun with his heavy equipment load when they encountered an obstacle that slowed their movement significantly. A section of ice-covered rocks required careful navigation, and Chin's explosive ordnance made him less agile than the rest of the team. Staff Sergeant, We need to reduce the equipment load, Williams called out during a brief halt behind cover. Rodriguez made another difficult decision. Chun, leave non-essential ordnance. Bring only what's needed for immediate defensive use. Chun quickly sorted his equipment, abandoning some of his explosive devices to increase his mobility. The decision was tactically sound, but Rodriguez knew they were reducing their defensive capabilities for future engagements. Foster and Turner were maintaining their bounding overwatch movement when Turner spotted the alternate landing zone ahead. Visual on the extraction site. Terrain looks suitable, but I can see enemy forces moving to intercept our approach. Rodriguez could see they were in a race against time and enemy movement. If enemy forces reached the landing zone before his team could secure it, the helicopter would be unable to land safely. Morrison was maintaining communication with the helicopter while moving under fire. Extraction 747 Alpha. We're 300 meters from alternate landing zone, but enemy forces are moving to intercept. The helicopter pilot's response showed he understood the urgency of the situation. 7 Alpha, I'm beginning approach to alternate site. I need that area secure in 5 minutes or extraction will not be possible. Rodriguez felt the pressure of command as he realized everything depended on his team's ability to reach and secure the landing zone within the next 5 minutes. Enemy forces were converging on the same area, and the outcome would depend on who arrived first and with superior firepower. All positions, maximum speed to the landing zone. This is our only chance. The team increased their pace, moving as quickly as safety allowed over the treacherous terrain. Rodriguez could hear the sound of helicopter rotors in the distance, growing closer as the extraction aircraft approached their position. Chun was struggling with the pace despite reducing his equipment load when Williams provided assistance that allowed them to maintain speed. I've got your 6, Chun. Focus on movement. Turner was providing security during their final approach to the landing zone when he made visual contact with enemy forces who were also approaching the area. Contact front. Enemy forces 300 meters ahead, moving toward the landing zone. Rodriguez immediately realized they were going to arrive at the extraction site at approximately the same time as enemy forces. The final phase of their escape would be a direct engagement for control of the helicopter landing area. Stalker 1, 7 Alpha. We need immediate fire support. Enemy and friendly forces converging on extraction site simultaneously. The sniper's response came as Rodriguez heard his rifle firing at maximum rate. 7 Alpha, engaging enemy forces approaching landing zone. You need to move faster. Rodriguez could see the landing zone ahead, a relatively flat area of snow-covered ground surrounded by rocky terrain that would provide good defensive positions. Enemy forces were approaching from the north while his team was coming from the south. Morrison was coordinating with the helicopter pilot as the aircraft became visible through the clearing weather. Extraction 747 Alpha. Landing zone is not secure. Enemy forces approaching from multiple directions. The pilot's response showed his determination to complete the extraction despite the dangerous conditions. 7 Alpha, I'm committing to the landing. You have 2 minutes to secure the area before I have to abort. Rodriguez knew this was their final chance. His team had 2 minutes to reach the landing zone, eliminate or suppress enemy forces in the area, and board the helicopter before it would be forced to leave without them. Final sprint to the landing zone, Rodriguez ordered. Engage any enemy forces in the area immediately. Foster reached the edge of the landing zone first, and immediately engaged enemy fighters who were approaching from the opposite direction. His accurate rifle fire forced them to take cover among the rocks surrounding the clear area. Turner arrived seconds later and took a position providing overlapping fire with Foster. Together, they established a defensive perimeter around the northern edge of the landing zone, while Rodriguez led the rest of the team toward the center where the helicopter would land. Chun and Williams reached the landing zone and immediately began preparing defensive positions around the area where the helicopter would touch down. Morrison was maintaining constant communication with the pilot, providing updates on wind conditions and enemy activity. Rodriguez could hear the helicopter approaching rapidly, its rotors creating a distinctive sound that echoed off the mountain peaks. At the same time, he could hear increasing gunfire as enemy forces attempted to reach firing positions around the landing zone. Stalker 1, 7 Alpha. Helicopter is landing now. We need maximum suppression of enemy positions for the next 60 seconds. The sniper immediately increased his rate of fire, engaging any enemy position that could threaten the landing helicopter. Rodriguez could see muzzle flashes from the sniper's position as he provided continuous covering fire. The helicopter appeared over the ridge line, flying low and fast toward their position. Rodriguez could see bullet strikes on the rocky terrain around the aircraft as enemy forces engaged it during the final approach. Williams was providing security when he spotted enemy forces with RPGs moving into position to engage the helicopter. RPG team moving into position 200 meters northeast. Rodriguez immediately shifted his fire to the RPG team, engaging them before they could fire at the helicopter. Foster and Turner also focused their fire on the most dangerous threats to the aircraft. The helicopter flared for landing, its rotor wash creating a whirlwind of snow and debris around the landing zone. Rodriguez could see the crew chief in the door of the aircraft, weapon ready, providing additional firepower to suppress enemy positions. Go, go, go! Rodriguez shouted as his team began moving toward the helicopter. Chun and Williams reached the aircraft first, loading quickly through the crew door while maintaining awareness of enemy fire around the landing zone. Turner followed immediately, providing security as he boarded. Foster was maintaining suppressive fire on enemy positions when Rodriguez grabbed his shoulder. Move.